Unitarian Universalism encourages an open-ended search for meaning in life and a commitment to asking our values to shape our actions. We are a pluralistic religion that draws wisdom from many sources. We welcome all people into our beloved community of whatever age, race, class, ethnicity, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious background. We especially welcome those of you who may be worshiping with us for the first time. Due to ongoing COVID-19 mitigation strategies, we are not having our normal coffee hour after service. Please check our calendar and newsletter for announcements of programs and events. Guests are welcome to participate in any activities in our community. If you would like more information about the congregation, or if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask any board member or Reverend Jay. Thank you.
And now we will have the spotlight. And I'm looking at the screen for the spotlight. I'll have to say a few more words if it's not there. Okay, there it is. Iowa is better than this. Free statement lament of Iowa's discriminatory legislation. Now, this was in our newsletter, and there are several sponsors, and all of their websites have the information. February 16th at 5 p.m., there is a 1-hour hybrid live, and all you need to link in to watch it at home, lament on about 9 issues of the legislation, which I expected to, but voter rights and LGBTQ and guns, and so a lament, but it's a nonpartisan statement to our state legislature, and we have contacted every legislator. It's a statement that we are watching, and we will be writing, phoning, and asking that you do legislation that is, like the song today, humble and kind, rather than discriminatory. So for us here at the Unitarian Church today, what do we want to know? Well, the League of Women Voters has a petition attached, which has to do with voter rights, and you may want to log on to League of Women Voters and do that. The Interfaith Alliance, of course, is one of the sponsors, and the State Board of AAUW, which is important to me. But the most important is IUWAN has recently signed on. So it's not on the screen, but it's also a statewide sponsor of it. And then personally, if you attended a coffee house a few years ago, Lojo, anybody here remember Lojo, the performer? I see Doug going, yes, yes, yes. Well, she will be performing during it, and we have commissioned her to write a song, and she has written a beautiful song called Better Than This. So if you log on, you will get to hear a performance by Lojo. Thank you very much.
Our opening words today come from the Dalai Lama and the Book of Joy. He uses the term wider perspective to encourage us to step back and look at the bigger picture, to move beyond our own limited self-awareness and self-interest. He states we must look at any given situation or problem from the front and the back, from both sides, and from the top and the bottom. So from at least 6 different angles. This allows us to take a more complete and holistic view of reality. And if we do, our response will be more constructive. With the wider perspective, we can see a situation and all those involved in a larger context, and can even see our own role in any conflict or misunderstanding. He also states, when you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new. We keep his words in mind as we discuss difficult conversations today. And now our chalice lighting. And the words will be on the screen. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to inspire. And now our land recognition.
Hi, I'm Diane Hammerand, a member of this congregation. We acknowledge the traditional owners of country on which our congregation's grounds are located, the Kickapoo, Peoria, Sauk, and Meskwaki, Miamiaki, and Ochatee-Chacuan, and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Please rise in body and or spirit for our opening hymn, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Justin, one second. I should say we will be performing this in a round this morning. The first time all together. The second time you can join Hannah, or if you want to wait a little bit and join me after, you can do that as well. We'll do it twice in a round. Thanks, Justin. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Come, come, whoever you are.
Come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again,
whoever you are.
come, come, whoever you are. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Well, about 25 of us took the workshop Difficult Conversations, the Art and Science of Working Together by Beare last month. And we're going to share a summary of it with you today. I'm going to give you an overview in 10 minutes of a 7.5-hour workshop. And then Elaine's going to talk a little bit more about a personal example of a difficult conversation from her experience. This workshop offered a framework for finding common ground between people on different sides of the many facets of our world right now. The slides I'm using today are from Kern's workshop, and I appreciate his willingness to allow their use today. I'm only going to cover the highlights and encourage all of you to access one of his workshops or his book. First of all, if you can put up the next slide, we are all familiar with the instinctual survival drive. And the next one, there we go. We all tend to either fight, flee, or freeze when presented with something frightening. These instincts developed early in our evolution when the most important survival skill was to avoid being eaten. Next. Our brain has 3 main sections, and I'm going to use my hand as a model to demonstrate. The lower brain is basically covering just our reflexes and autonomic nervous system. The midbrain is more involved with our feelings, particularly the amygdala, which I'm going to use my thumb to show, which manages our fear. And then there's the upper part of our brain, the cortex, which developed last and covers the rest of the brain. And that's the part of our brain that allows us to reason and problem solve. So you can go to the next one. We need all of our survival strategies to manage with our brain and work together. But, next, what ends up happening is when we're afraid, we flip our lid, is what Kern used as an example. And all these parts of our brain become disconnected. They're no longer working with each other, and so we can't access our higher level abilities very well. And we're just functioning predominantly with our lower brain or even with our amygdala. Difficult conversations can trigger these same basic instincts because our brain doesn't distinguish between physical threats and emotional threats. And those instincts are inappropriate now for responding to the challenges of today, when the most important survival skills are communication and cooperation. When we feel threatened during a conversation, we may fight by arguing or aggressively trying to make our point and win. We may flee by avoiding the conversation entirely or giving up on the conversation and walking away. We may freeze and find ourselves flustered or unable to respond at all. Next. So Kern talked about needing new survival guides. I was going to talk about this part a little bit. These are the major portions of the prefrontal cortex. And these are the skills that we lose when we flip our lid. We're unable to feel compassion or respond with flexibility, become more self-aware, modulate our feelings, rely on our intuition, use empathy or moral reasoning. Okay, next. So the new survival drives that he talks about are the relationship being more important than winning, seeing beyond our own story, which is the lens through which we view the world, and transforming our instinctive resistance to something more responsive. So let's talk first about the next one. The first one, prioritizing our relationship over being right. Our brain basically, you can go to the next one, helps us build relationships. When we have our early bonding experiences as a child, that builds the ability of our brain to connect with people. And when we learn the stories of others when we're young children and as we grow, it makes us more compassionate and have empathy. Even when we connect with people, there are hormones in the brain that are released, oxytocin particularly, that's called the love hormone, that allows us to feel that connection with others. And stories activate something called mirror neurons in the brain. When we talk to people, our faces tend to reflect the face of the person we're talking to. And that's something that our brain learns at a very early age. When we lose our reasoning skills and our capacity for empathy, our conversation and sometimes the relationship itself comes to an unsatisfying or perhaps even ugly end. I'm going to offer an example. I have a nephew who's very dear to me, and he's a traditional Catholic, and he's a conservative Republican. So I'm aware that we don't agree on many issues. However, I value our history and our relationship over all of that, and I would never risk damaging our relationship over these issues. We've occasionally had short conversations in which we've let each other know that we don't agree with one another about certain things, but we don't take it any farther because that would imply we're trying to convince the other person of the error of their ways. And I respect him and love him too much to create a rift. And yet, we know where each other stands. We're not avoiding the situation. Okay, next. He talked a lot about our story, and what he meant by that is that we develop this story of who we are and it becomes our identity. Most of us have some unconscious assumptions that our story, the particular set of life experiences from which we've derived our sense of self, is the totality of who we are. And when we perceive a threat to our story self, to our values, our attitudes, and beliefs, it triggers these instinctive responses of fighting or fleeing or freezing. And when that happens, simmering disagreements can quickly become combustible. Next. So it's almost as if we're standing with a cage in front of us. If you can tell from that, there's nothing on either side or behind that person. So they're self-imprisoned in this sense of who their story is, and they're looking out into the world, seeing only what's in front of them, and not understanding that if they would turn, they would find other aspects of themselves and of the world to see. We need to recognize that our identity encompasses more than just our learned story. If we can recognize this more expanded sense of self, it unleashes a host of positive emotions and attributes, including compassion, gratitude, flexibility, creativity, and receptivity to new ideas. all of which counteract our survival guide instinct. Next slide. So then we're able to gain some perspective. And if we try to understand and learn the stories of others, we become wiser. But we don't ever learn that if we don't listen. Back to the Dalai Lama. We can become more humble, more objective, and more open. I'll give you another example. I have a dear friend who was recently placed in a nursing home. Her husband is a conservative who, from my perspective, seems to buy into a lot of the conspiracy theories we hear about out there. And I've usually avoided conversations with him because I feared having a disagreement. But because of that, I really didn't get to know him very well. Working with him and my friend through this transition that they've been going through, has helped me get to know him better, to my benefit. He's a really good guy, one I respect. And this has helped me to see him in a broader picture and to put his political views in just one chapter of his story, so to speak, or one room of his house. And if we can try to see people in that metaphor, it helps us see their broader story. Next. Transforming resistance into reactivity and into a response is another thing he talked about. Resistance is our early warning system that our survival drive is beginning to kick into gear. When we're in resistance, our attention narrows, our heart rate increases, our stress level rises. You've all had that feeling, I'm sure. All signals of an emerging fight, flee, or freeze reaction. Resistance is triggered if someone pushes your intolerance button. You learn your intolerances with your story. We all have certain things we don't tolerate well. If we can transform our resistance into a more responsive reaction, we'll strengthen our cognitive capacities, which we need to heal our current divide. We'll enlarge the context within which we see ourselves and our relationships. These are two critical shifts in perspective that reveal the common ground on which we stand. Again, an example. One of my intolerance buttons is sexism. So if someone talks to me as if I'm a little piece of fluff that has to be protected from harm, my hackles come out. And if I'm speaking to someone who's treating me as if I'm an inferior, I feel I have to prove something. It's hard for me to hear any common ground. And this has sometimes led to unnecessary friction that's come back to bite me later, especially if that person is an in-law. Doug knows who I'm talking about. I have to learn to tell myself that I can be assertive without being angry. So, how do you do that? How do you do these things? Next. Kern talked about 3 skill sets that are very important to learn. One is self-calming, one is connecting, and the other is openness. If we can do these 3 things better, we'll be better able to listen to other people's stories and learn and find common ground, express our own stories, be calmly assertive, all of those things. Next, he also talked about several long-term practices that can be helpful. Meditation, learning to seek awe and wonder in your life, which I find in nature, expressing gratitude, embracing your humanity and your mistakes, and uncovering your unconscious attachments and the things that make you intolerant. I hope this all made sense to you. A 10-minute summary of a 7.5-hour workshop is kind of a reach. I found this material to be an excellent integration of several biological, psychological, and social theories. And when we're done today, I'd like to propose that we do something with it in our congregation, because it's nice to go to workshops, but then it's more important to do something with that information. So we're going to invite anyone who's interested to a hybrid gathering after service next week. You can come in person or online just to talk about this workshop if you're interested in learning more and figuring out a way, I have no preconceived notions of how we could do that, to implement some of these ideas in our conversation. These things could benefit our congregation. And speaking of benefiting our congregation, I'm trying to be like Jay here. Each week we take a collection. This month, we're sharing our plate with Transitions, an organization that provides mental health and social services to support to clients with various needs in our community. Please consider making a donation. You can donate online or today in service. All donations are shared 50% with Transitions. Please be as generous as you can. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Susan Perry, a pastoral care associate. In this time of sharing, we take time to read from the Book of Joys and Sorrows, which is located in the hall leading into the sanctuary. Please feel free to write in this book before each service. Please also mention to Jay or one of the pastoral care team if we may help you through any of life's stresses or changes. We mostly have yellow badges, like this. There is one sorrow mentioned in the book today from the Harringtons. February 4th marked 11 years since Anne's husband and Diane and Hannah's father died. They miss him dearly every day, but these snowy days are especially difficult. I'm going to see if anybody has written anything in the chat, and do not see anything that's a joy or sorrow listed there. For what we have shared and what remains in the quiet of our thoughts, we are grateful. Let us enter into a short, quiet meditation within the energy of our congregation. I leave you with a quote from Douglas Stone from Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. Quote, "No matter how good you are at reframing, the single most important rule about managing the interaction is this. You can't move the conversation in a more positive direction until the other person feels heard and understood. And they won't feel heard and understood until you've listened. When the other person becomes highly emotional, listen and try to understand their view. Whenever you feel overwhelmed or unsure how to proceed, remember that it is always a good time to listen."
Today, we will be performing Humble and Kind for you. You know there's a light that glows by the front door. Don't forget the keys under the mat. When childhood stars shine, always stay humble and kind.
Go to church 'cause your mama says to. Visit Grandpa every chance that you can. It won't be wasted time.
Always stay humble and kind. Hold the door, say please, say thank you. Don't steal, don't cheat, and don't lie. I know you got mountains to climb, but always stay humble and kind. When the dreams you're dreaming come to you, when the work you put in is realized,
Let yourself feel the pride, but
always stay humble and kind. When it's hot, drink a glass of lemonade.
shut off the AC and roll the windows down. Let that summer sun shine.
Always stay humble and kind. Don't take for granted the love this life gives you. When you get where you're going, don't forget, turn back around. Help the next one in line. Always stay humble and kind.
As we were planning today, I didn't know what that song was going to be until yesterday, and I don't know who suggested it, but it was just perfect for today. And also, before I start, I have to acknowledge that Frank Gorshey, the father that was mentioned in the Joys and Concerns, is one of the major reasons I'm a Unitarian. And I also remember that at his service, it's probably the only time in our history that Blood, Sweat, and Tears was played as the song, and I still play it occasionally. So about the workshop. I enjoy learning, so I enjoyed spending 3 winter afternoons, Saturday afternoons, in class. And I did learn things about myself, which was the purpose of the workshop. But I didn't learn how to start that difficult conversation. I loved the flipping of the slides, flipping of the lid, great. But I thought we were going to learn how to convince someone to put on a mask. Nearly all of us mentioned at least once that our most difficult conversations were with our children. Boy, those little buggers know how to push our buttons. Flip our lids. Why is that? I learned it's important to value the relationship and to have a relationship. But my grandson told me conversations are hardest because you don't want to hurt the feelings of someone you care about. You don't want to damage the relationship by being critical or honest. It may become harder to talk or easier to clam up or flip out or make a joke. Avoidance takes many forms, and we all do it. The Quad City Times last week ran an editorial about a terrible person being terrible to young staff at a smoothie shop. Maybe some of you read it. The man threw a glass and called one of the employees a dumb immigrant. It went viral. The man's identity was uncovered, He was found guilty and arrested. He lost his job at Merrill Lynch. People on social media were terrible to him. It turned out the guy was having a meltdown. Clearly, that was true. But hours before, due to miscommunication in the smoothie shop, his son, who was terribly allergic to peanuts, was given a smoothie with peanuts in it. His son had a deadly allergy, had an attack, and had been taken by ambulance to the hospital. Each Saturday before workshop, I sat down having just escaped a difficult conversation. I'll illustrate. I want the yard sign up there, not that one. Okay. All right. I was driving my friend home and we passed this sign. "What do you think about that sign?" she said. I smiled and nearly laughed out loud. "What do you mean? Love is love." "What kind of love?" she said. "It's kind of like the sign in my own yard, love unites us," I said, still smiling and stopping at her door. "I have to go. I'm late for a Zoom." Now, this friend and I can and do talk, and we do disagree over many things. But we will come back to this, and we will probably not change either of our minds, but at least she knows I will ask her to explain again what she meant by what kind of love. What will I ask that will make her question her attitude? I can only hope that we give each other something new to think about. The previous Saturday, I was having coffee with 6 pleasant but not close acquaintances. I asked the man next to me what he did for a living. He'd been a minister at a church. The name of the church didn't give me a clue as to the denomination. I responded that I was a UU and was about to ask his denomination. "Oh, that's a nothing church." You can imagine the nervous reactions around the table. I said I could see how he might think that because we raise our children to think for themselves and to question. I wouldn't even tell my own grandson what I believed. I considered it too private, a little too bizarre, too. Then, smiling, I said to the man, "My faith is very important to me. Why did you say it was a nothing church?" Well, it turns out that Lutherans have what I'll just call a set of rules. But if you don't have those rules, then you have nothing. He had not meant it or said it to start an argument. He thought he was taking a friendly jab to open conversation. He really hadn't. I thought he'd flipped his lid. No, he hadn't flipped his lid. He thought he was starting a conversation. And I was glad I asked instead of flipping my lid. The third example came midweek, before the last session. You may remember the story in the newspaper in January that an elementary school had admitted an after-school Satan group. Well, we're making bylaws changes at the resident council at the community I live in. Now, that usually bylaws changes puts people to sleep. But one resident posted her opinion in the newsletter before the meeting. They propose to eliminate Christ-centered and make it faith-based. Faith-based is way too ambiguous, as you can have faith in anything, even Satan. Now, you know I flipped my lid, making the assumption that the gullible woman had been reading the paper and thought the elementary school group was evil and was going to move into our neighborhood. I'm not going to go into detail the steps I took, and it was lengthy, writing up what I would say at the meeting. It didn't have to be read. There were so many flipped lids at that meeting that the bylaws were postponed for 6 weeks. I now have 6 weeks to get to know this person and understand her resistance to faith-based. I may find that she knew nothing of the Satan Club in the elementary school and that I was totally wrong. The purpose of our 9-hour workshop was, and then that's the picture that should be up there, the purpose, to help us become the people we need to be to have the conversations we need to have. The workshop fulfilled its purpose. I do understand myself much better. I do understand that I flip my lid much more easily with someone I don't know. I make really awful assumptions about them sometimes, like the stupid ninny that objected to faith-based. I react strongly when my own faith is challenged. I'll bet that what I'll find out is that she really is not a stupid ninny. But we will talk before 6 weeks is over. I do want to leave you with a word about how I learned to navigate difficult conversations, because in each one of these I have. I learned from my cousin, Dr. Ron Burks, who lectures around the world on cults. To help someone get out of a cult, or now we might say cult-like thinking, you can't argue. It causes them to turn off and they hear nothing. In other words, it causes them to flip their lid. The most potent weapon is a good, thoughtful question. And we all learned during COVID that you can't give scientific evidence on masks or vaccines. So from Kern, I learned to step back and take a breath, then ask a question to help us both learn and perhaps change or moderate our views. The question might be asking the person in example 3, I need to ask her if she had read about the elementary school. Maybe she didn't. Once again, I've jumped to the wrong assumption. If she had heard the story, I would be prepared with a follow-up that, did you read what Shane Brown said in the Quad City Times about Satan clubs? I don't have to provide either article if she hasn't. If it piqued her interest, she can do the inquiry. And I might find out we have many things in common, even if we differ on this one. For bylaws 6 weeks from now, I need to remember she is only one vote. I may have to garner votes for faith-based bylaws. And as we have all learned, I will have to be sure that the votes are counted accurately. What could any one of us have said to the man who flipped out in the smoothie shop? You seem very upset. Can you please tell me what's the problem? We might have seen a very different video. What if the manager had simply taken responsibility and said, have we done something to upset you? What's wrong? The workshop was a useful and appropriate topic for a Sunday because it was all about searching our own souls, taking a deep breath, and remembering first to be humble and kind. And before we sing the last song, Valor, John, as you get ready, I'm going to ask Maggie Tanglin to come up and say a few words about Valor.
My name is Molly Tegland. I grew up in this church. I've been part of this congregation for a long time. Valor, at one time, was a part of the weekly service, of every weekly service. It was sung at the end of the service as a benediction. It was written by Henry J. Adlard, who lived from 1873 to 1941. He was the father of Waitstill Sharp's second wife. So there's a long history with this song. And I found it interesting, and this has only been recently, that it's a hymn that has no gender bias at all, no mention of gender. And the words are very good. The words are words that could be lived by. And our prior hymnal, it was pasted into the back. This book was published this hymnal was Hymns for the Celebration of Life, was published in 1993. And Valor was in prior hymnals as well. So have a look at the lyrics as you sing them.
Please rise in body and our spirit for our closing hymn, Valor. Soul of truth, eternal goodness, sojourn with us as we part. Fill our minds with thy endeavor. Keep us just and pure in heart. Strengthen us for daily duty. Guide us by the inward light. Hallowed be each coming morning. Calm and peaceful be each night.
So, John, I'm going to make one small additional ending to this service. I'm going to read the Presbyterian prayer of confession now, which I learned 2 weeks ago when I went to First Presbyterian Church instead of coming here. And after that, I would like us to sing that song again. But you asked me at what tempo it should be sung, and Anne, or your daughters, what tempo should it be sung at? I think it's a lively, hopeful ending the next time we sing it, rather than kind of a
faster.
Yeah, faster,
Gotcha.
faster. Okay, can we sing it again?
Of course.
After I read this?
Yes.
All right. All right. God of life, we admit to you and to each other that we have not always lived our lives in love. We have lost patience, been rude and irritable, and insisted on our own way. We are too comfortable with the way things are, and we remain silent in the presence of injustice. Forgive us and heal us. Fill us with love that is humble and patient. Thank you.
Soul of truth, eternal goodness, sojourn with us as we part. Fill our minds with high endeavor. Keep us just and pure in heart. us for daily duty. Guide us by the inward light, hallowed by each coming morning. Calm and peaceful be each night. Amen.
I have another job to do. Oh my. All right. So now we're going to extinguish the chalice, and we will do that right now. And we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.